So a bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs exactly $1 more than the ball. How much is the ball?
Let me guess. Your brain just screamed, 10 cents.
Yeah, right. And if your brain just yelled 10 cents at you, well, congratulations, your mental autopilot is working perfectly.
It's also, completely wrong.
Exactly. Completely wrong.
Because the real answer is 5 cents. I mean, a 5-cent ball plus a bat that costs $1.05, that equals a total of $1.10.
Which is, it's undeniably simple math once you actually hear it laid out like that.
Oh, absolutely. Yet, almost everyone gets it wrong on the first try. Because your brain just confidently and loudly feeds you incorrect information instantly.
And that little math problem, it's really the perfect entry point for what we're doing today. We were taking a deep dive into the Nobel Prize-winning work of psychologist Daniel Kahneman.
Right. Specifically his monumental book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yeah, the mission here is to really unpack this massive, fascinating question. Why do our brains constantly trick us? I mean, you make an estimated 35,000 decisions every single day.
It's a staggering number when you think about it.
It really is. Most of them are tiny, some are completely life-altering, but almost all of them are governed by this mental software that is, frankly, full of very predictable glitches.
And understanding how those glitches operate mechanically, that is the key to becoming a sharper, much more effective decision maker. Kahneman's entire framework rests on this foundational idea that there are two distinct characters, or like operating systems, living inside your head.
He famously named them System 1 and System 2.
Right. We operate on a dual process model.
So let's break down those two characters for a second. System 1 is fast, it's automatic, emotional, and, well, largely unconscious.
It requires almost zero effort.
Right. When you read a giant billboard while flying down the highway, or when you instinctively know what 2 plus 2 equals, or, when you're driving on a completely empty road and your mind is wandering somewhere else entirely.
That is System 1 running the show.
Exactly. And it handles roughly 96% of the decisions you make every day.
Which leaves a mere 4% of your daily cognition to System 2. And this system is the complete opposite. It is slow, deliberate, highly logical, and incredibly lazy.
So lazy.
System 2 requires real, measurable physical energy and intense focus. Like, if I ask you to multiply 17 by 24 in your head right now.
Please don't.
Right. Or if you're trying to parallel park in a really tight space with like an angry line of cars waiting behind you, your pupils actually dilate. Your heart rate measurably goes up.
Wait, really? Your pupils dilate?
Yeah. That is the physical manifestation of System 2 being forced to wake up and get to work.
Okay, so here is how I've started visualizing this whole dynamic. Because we all love to think that we are System 2.
Oh, for sure.
We all think we are the main character, right? This highly rational, calculating being, carefully guiding our own lives.
Yeah.
But System 2 is really just a lazy middle manager.
I love that analogy.
And System 1 is this eager, hyperactive intern who keeps rushing into the office and slapping papers on the manager's desk. The manager is so utterly exhausted that they just blindly rubber stamp whatever the intern hands them without actually reading it. We are the lazy manager.
That is a brutally accurate dynamic, but we have to look at the biological reasoning behind it. This isn't some evolutionary design flaw.
It's not.
No, it is a critical survival mechanism. The brain consumes a massive amount of glucose when it engages System 2. If you had to use deliberate, logical System 2 thinking for every single choice.
Like how to tie your shoes.
Right, or which exact angle to step over a puddle, or how to parse the subtle tone of your boss's voice, you would be cognitively exhausted by breakfast. You literally wouldn't be able to function. System 1 keeps us alive by outsourcing the heavy lifting. Its incredible speed is a feature, not a bug, but that speed comes with a very real cost in accuracy.
Wait, I have to push back on this a little. If System 1 is so deeply flawed and constantly making terrible, irrational guesses like the bat and ball problem, how do humans survive this long? I mean, why didn't evolution just weed out this glitchy software millions of years ago?
Because evolution doesn't care about absolute mathematical truth. It cares about keeping you alive until tomorrow.
Okay, fair point.
Think about our ancestors foraging in the woods. If they heard a rustle in the bushes, System 1 instantly jumped to the conclusion, lion, run.
Was it always a lion?
No, most of the time it was just the wind. But the cost of making a fast, mathematically incorrect assumption was low, while the cost of using slow, deliberate System 2 to gather more data.
Like, let me examine the rustling pattern to determine wind speed.
Exactly. Doing that usually meant getting eaten. Jumping to conclusions kept us alive.
That makes total sense. We are optimized for survival, not for modern statistical analysis. But because the manager's so tired and the intern is moving so unbelievably fast, their brain takes modern shortcuts.
Right. In psychology, these are called heuristics. They're essentially mental rules of thumb that System 1 uses to save energy, and they are the root cause of almost all our cognitive biases.
Let's get into some of these shortcuts.
So a major one Kahneman identifies is substitution. System 1 secretly swaps out a really hard, complex question for a much easier one, and it doesn't even alert your conscious brain that a swap took place.
Give me an example of that.
Imagine you are trying to decide, is this new tech startup a solid long-term investment? That is a heavy System 2 question. It requires analyzing cash flow, market fit, competitor moats.
All the exhausting stuff.
Right. System 1 hates that kind of work, so it swaps that question for, do I like the charismatic founder of this company?
Oh, wow.
You answer the easy emotional question, and you trick yourself into thinking you successfully analyzed the hard financial one.
I realized I fall for another one of these shortcuts, anchoring every time I negotiate.
Oh.
The concept is that the first number you hear completely biases your subsequent thought process, right?
Absolutely.
I was buying a used car a few years ago, and the dealer started the negotiation with an absolutely laughable sky-high price. Like, I knew it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But suddenly, when he dropped the price down to a number that was still a terrible deal, my brain felt this wave of relief.
Yep.
The second number felt perfectly reasonable, simply because my brain was anchored to the first one.
It's one of the most effective negotiation tactics in the world because it exploits a fundamental mechanical flaw. System 1 relies entirely on context rather than calculating absolute value. It needs a starting point to build its reality around.
It's just wild how easily we're manipulated by that.
And that ties directly into another major shortcut, the availability heuristic. We judge how likely something is to happen based purely on how easily we can drag an example of it happening out of our memory.
Which perfectly explains our fear of flying versus driving.
Precisely. Commercial plane crashes are statistically incredibly rare. But when they happen, they dominate the news cycle for weeks. The footage is dramatic, it's highly emotional, and easily accessible in your memory.
So when you're simply walking down the jet bridge to board a flight,
System 1 pulls up those terrifying, vivid memories instantly, making you vastly overestimate the actual danger. Meanwhile, driving a car on the highway is statistically far more dangerous.
right, but fender benders are so common and mundane, they never make the national news.
Exactly. System 1 doesn't flag driving as a major existential threat because those vivid memories just aren't as available.
So if System 1 is just substituting questions, anchoring to random numbers, and making up stories based on whatever dramatic imagery is floating around in my memory, it essentially craves a coherent narrative over actual truth.
Kahneman coined an acronym for this exact phenomenon. WYSIOT. What you see is all there is. System 1 simply does not care about the information it doesn't possess.
It just ignores what's missing.
Yep. It takes whatever tiny fragments of data are immediately available in the environment and aggressively weaves them into the best, most coherent story possible. If the story feels complete, System 1 is satisfied, and it sends that rubber stamp over to System 2. It's a storytelling machine that believes its own fiction.
So if System 1 is desperately trying to create a coherent story out of limited facts, how does it handle risk? Because investing money, changing careers, or placing a bet doesn't have a guaranteed ending.
This is where Kahneman completely revolutionized behavioral economics with prospect theory. It dismantled the old classical economic idea that humans are perfectly rational calculators of wealth who always make the logical choice.
The Homo economicus idea.
Right. The core pillar of prospect theory is loss aversion. Mechanically, we do not view money or resources in absolute terms. We view them strictly relative to our current reference point.
Okay.
And crucially, the psychological pain of losing something is approximately twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing.
Let's illustrate this for the listener with the classic 50-50 bet thought experiment. Imagine I offer you a choice right now. Option A, I reach into my pocket and hand you $46 guaranteed.
Nice.
Option B, we flip a coin. If it's heads, you win $100. If it's tails, you walk away with absolutely nothing. Instinctually, my brain screams to just take the guaranteed $46.
Most people do. But mathematically, taking the guaranteed cash is the irrational choice.
Wait, really?
Yes, the expected value of the coin flip is $50 because you have a 50% chance of winning $100. $50 is demonstrably higher than $46.
So a perfectly rational economic robot would always take the coin toss.
Always.
Yeah.
Because it's the more profitable long-term play. But humans are so deeply averse to the sharp, stinging feeling of ending up with zero when we could have had something, that we will eagerly accept a mathematically worse deal just to guarantee safety.
And again, there's a fascinating evolutionary why behind this. For our ancestors, living on the bleeding edge of survival, gaining an extra day's worth of food was just a nice bonus. But losing a day's worth of food could literally mean starving to death.
We are hardwired to treat losses as existential threats.
You actually see this play out in modern low-stakes environments too, like on the PGA Golf Tour.
Oh, the golf study?
Yeah. When a professional golfer is putting for par, meaning if they miss, they get a bogey, which registers as a loss. They putt significantly more accurately than when they are putting for a birdie, which is a chance to gain a stroke. The fear of dropping a shot mechanically focuses their attention far more than the excitement of gaining one.
Psychologist Paul Rosen offers a highly visual analogy that I think captures this asymmetry beautifully.
Oh, I know this one. It's gross but effective.
It really is. Imagine a large bowl of beautiful, perfectly ripe cherries. If you drop a single live cockroach into that bowl, the entire bowl is instantly ruined. Nobody is eating those cherries.
Definitely not.
But if you have a bowl full of cockroaches, dropping a single beautiful cherry in there does absolutely nothing to improve the situation.
That is a visceral, unforgettable image.
The negative fundamentally overpowers the positive.
And this explains so much about human stagnation. It explains why people hold on to plummeting stock investments way too long. They refuse to sell because that turns a theoretical paper loss into a real, painful loss.
Right, or why people stay in toxic relationships or dead-end jobs for years.
Exactly. The sheer terror of realizing the loss of the time you've invested completely overrides the cold mathematical logic of moving on to something better. We are overwhelmingly biased to play not to lose rather than playing to win.
So true.
Okay, so our brains are terrible at calculating value in the present moment because we're terrified of losing. But if you think we are bad at navigating the present, wait until you realize how poorly our brains record the past.
This is where we get into Kahneman's concept of the two selves, the experiencing self and the remembering self. This might be one of his most profound insights.
Let's define them.
The experiencing self is who you are in this exact millisecond. It lives entirely in the present, feeling every moment of joy, pain, or boredom as it happens. But the remembering self is the historian. It keeps score. It writes the narrative of your life that you carry with you.
And the remembering self is an absolutely terrible historian.
It really is.
It uses a shortcut called the peak-end rule. When we look back on an experience, we completely ignore the duration of it. The total amount of time spent doesn't matter.
The brain only records two distinct data points. The peak, meaning the single most intense moment of emotion, good or bad, and the end, how the experience finally concluded.
The clinical studies demonstrating this are just astounding. Tell them about the colonoscopy study.
Yeah, so this was back before heavy anesthetics were standard, so the procedure was objectively quite painful. Researchers split patients into two groups. Group A had a standard, painful procedure. Group B had the exact same standard, painful procedure. But at the very end, the doctor left the scope in for 3 extra minutes without moving it.
Which was uncomfortable, but significantly less painful than the actual exam.
Exactly. Meaning Group B objectively suffered for a longer total period of time. They experienced more total minutes of physical discomfort, but because the final moments, the end, were less painful than the peak, when interviewed later, Group B remembered the overall procedure as being much less traumatic than Group A did. They literally preferred a longer procedure with more total pain simply because it had a slightly better ending.
That is wild. And again, evolutionarily, this makes sense. Your brain doesn't need a minute-by-minute log of a lion attack. It only needs to remember the peak, how dangerous the lion was, and the end, did we survive and escape?
Right.
I see this happen in daily life all the time. Imagine you spend a gorgeous Saturday having a picnic in the park with your family. The sun is shining, the food is incredible, and you spend 6 hours having a genuinely wonderful time.
Sounds perfect.
Right, but on the drive home, you run over a nail, get a flat tire, and have to change it in the pouring rain. People will go to work on Monday and say, ugh, that flat tire ruined the whole day.
But it didn't.
Exactly. You had 6 hours of joy and 30 minutes of intense annoyance. The experiencing self had a fantastic day, but the remembering self highlights the negative ending and completely overwrites the historical narrative.
The duration of the joy is completely neglected. Your memories are highly edited highlight reels. They are not unedited security footage.
I love that phrase.
And the crucial realization here is that the remembering self is the one making the choices for your future. When you decide whether to go on a similar picnic again or whether to return to a specific doctor, you aren't consulting the experiencing self who actually lived it.
You're consulting the remembering self.
Right. You do not choose between experiences, you choose between the memories of experiences.
This all paints an incredibly cohesive, bulletproof picture of human nature. But looking at the broader scientific context of this work, we really have to talk about the replication crisis.
Yes.
Because recently, the scientific community has started to push back on several of Kahneman's claims, taking some of the shine off this framework.
It is absolutely vital to address the replication crisis. Over the last 10 to 15 years, the psychology community realized they had a massive structural problem. Scientists tried to rerun classic experiments to see if they could get the same results, and, well, an alarming number of them completely failed to replicate.
And unfortunately, some of the research Kahneman cited heavily in chapters 3 and 4 got caught right in the crossfire.
Yeah, those chapters dealt heavily with a concept called priming, the idea that incredibly subtle environmental cues unconsciously dictate our major behaviors. The classic claim was that simply seeing a picture of a dollar bill on a wall would instantly make you act more selfishly in an experiment.
I remember reading about that one everywhere.
It turns out many of those priming studies were severely underpowered. Here is how that happened mechanically. Researchers would run a study with a tiny sample size, maybe just 20 college students. They would test 50 different variables, find one weird behavioral correlation by pure chance, what statisticians refer to as statistical noise, and then publish it as a major psychological breakthrough.
This is known as p-hacking, right?
Exactly. When independent labs tried to replicate the dollar bill experiment with thousands of people under strict conditions, the effect completely vanished.
Now, to Kahneman's immense credit, when this data came to light, he didn't get defensive. He published a public letter gracefully admitting he had placed far too much faith in those underpowered, flawed studies.
Which shows incredible scientific integrity. There are also some very practical alternative perspectives from groups like the Mises Institute. They looked at that famous PGA golf study where golfers putt better for par than for birdie.
Oh, did they find an issue with that too?
Well, they raised a much simpler mechanical question. Is putting for par really a psychological manifestation of loss aversion? Or is a birdie putt usually just physically further away from the hole and therefore inherently harder to make?
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. It's a great reminder to always look for a simple mechanical explanation before defaulting to a grand psychological one. Furthermore, recent economic research has challenged the universality of loss aversion. It seems it might not actually exist for small amounts of money.
Like small change.
Yeah. If you stand to lose $20, people don't actually react twice as intensely as gaining $20. The famous 2-to-1 loss aversion ratio only consistently kicks in when the stakes get noticeably higher, around $100 or more.
So, hearing all this context, do we throw the baby out with the bathwater? Are System 1 and System 2 entirely debunked?
Not at all. You just have to separate the peripheral novelty studies from the core architecture. The foundational framework, the existence of fast and slow thinking, the major heuristics like anchoring and large-scale loss aversion is incredibly robust.
But it still holds up.
Absolutely. It has survived rigorous modern testing. The replication crisis simply teaches us that we shouldn't view this book as absolute, flawless scientific law. We should read it as a highly insightful subjective account by a brilliant thinker trying to synthesize decades of messy human data.
The edges of the theory are a bit frayed, but the core foundation of the house is structurally sound.
Well said.
So, knowing that the core framework is sound, how do we actually use this? How do you and I hack our own glitchy systems to make better decisions in our daily lives?
The most actionable takeaway is that you cannot outthink System 1 in the heat of the moment. It is simply too fast.
Right, the intern is too quick.
Exactly. If you want to change your behavior, you have to design your environment so that System 1 naturally takes the route you desire. You have to change the default path.
I think the ultimate example of this is global organ donation rates. In countries where becoming an organ donor is the default, meaning you have to actively check a box to opt out, donation rates are phenomenally high, hovering between 80 to 90%.
That's incredible.
But in countries where the default is not being a donor and you have to check a box to opt in, the rates plummet to 15 to 30%. The human beings in these countries aren't radically different in their morality. The environment is just structured differently.
System 1 simply takes the path of least resistance.
Yep.
If you want to apply that to your own life, say you want to eat healthier, do not rely on System 2 willpower to resist the junk food sitting in your pantry at midnight. Use System 2 at the grocery store to not buy the junk food in the first place. You are changing the default environment so your exhausted System 1 can't make a bad choice later.
There is also a brilliant operational strategy here for business owners or anyone managing projects. It is a filter for how fast you should move.
I like this one.
If a decision is easily reversible, like trying a new social media strategy or changing a daily workflow, rely on System 1. Move fast, trust your gut, and rely on your accumulated experience. But if a decision is irreversible, like signing a 5-year commercial lease or taking on a massive loan, you must aggressively force yourself to slow down and engage System 2.
And when you do engage System 2 for those massive, irreversible decisions, you should deploy a technique called the pre-mortem.
A pre-mortem.
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool to defeat your brain's natural overconfidence. Before you launch a major project, sit down with a notebook and imagine it is exactly 3 years in the future. The project has failed completely and utterly. It is a smoking crater.
That sounds depressing.
It is. But your job is to write down exactly why it failed. By forcing your brain to assume failure is an established historical fact, System 1 instantly stops spinning its optimistic, coherent story.
Oh, that's clever.
And System 2 is forced to hunt for the hidden flaws, risks, and blind spots that you were desperately ignoring.
Let's bring this all together. What we've uncovered today is that we are wonderfully complex machines, piloted mostly by an automatic storytelling autopilot, which is System 1.
Right.
This autopilot is phenomenally fast and keeps us alive, but it is deeply prone to fearing loss, taking lazy mental shortcuts, and relying on the highly edited, distorted memories of our remembering self.
Meanwhile, our logical, calculating brain System 2 mostly just happily goes along for the ride, rubber stamping the paperwork unless we actively force it to wake up.
But the empowering realization is that just by knowing these systems and biases exist, you are already better equipped than you were an hour ago.
That's the real value.
The next time you find yourself jumping to a harsh conclusion about a person, or holding on to a terrible investment simply because you don't want to realize the loss, or letting a single flat tire ruin your memory of a fantastic day, you can hit pause. You can recognize System 1 doing its thing.
You can wake up the manager and actually check the intern's work.
Exactly. To close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought from Daniel Kahneman. It's a concept he calls the focusing illusion, and the quote goes like this: "Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you are thinking about it."
That is an incredibly powerful lens through which to view your daily anxieties.
It really is. So I want you to look around your life today and ask yourself, what are you obsessing over right now? What stressful email or awkward conversation or minor setback has System 1 tricked you into thinking is the absolute end of the world?
Because I promise you, a year from now, your remembering self probably won't even record that it happened.
Keep your eye on the 5-cent ball. Until next time.